Hello and good afternoon. I'm your host Abdurrahim Kashur, and this is the L24 daily special coverage. Russian attacks on critical infrastructure knocked out power in Ukraine's northeast. Ukrainian officials said on Sunday night, condemning the strikes as an apparent act of revenge for regions taken back by Ukrainian troops. On the hotspot, Ukraine began turning off the last working reactor at Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant after closing that keeping it running could well the prelude to nuclear meltdown at Europe's largest nuclear power facility. On the other side, the Russian Energy Minister Nikolai Shulginov confirmed that his country will not sell oil and gas at a price below the value of their production costs in response to the directives of the US Treasury Department. To analyze all this information, I'm joined live from Ukraine by Mr. Alexei Yakubin, a PhD in political science and a senior lecturer at Kiev University. And from India, Dr. Fariduddin Khan, professor of political science and international relations. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us in this debate. A short break, and we start our debate. And before we read this, before we start this discussion, let me read for you this piece of information. Flames lit up the night sky at power station on the western outskirts of Kharkiv on Sunday after it was hit in a strike causing a widespread blackout. Ukrainian officials said Kharkiv, the country's second biggest heat and power plant, had been hit in a Russian attack. At least one person was killed at the plant, according to the head of the Kharkiv Regional Administration. Igor Tirkov, mayor of Kharkiv, wrote on his Telegram channel that the consequences of missile strikes are severe for the city. However, authorities were working to restore the supply of electricity and water to Kharkiv residents. Mr. Alexei, based on the information given, and since you are in Ukraine, you do have a different reading to the situation over there. So what are you telling us, and how Ukraine is making these counteroffensive attacks?
From Kyiv's position, it's some neurotic reaction from Russia on the counter-attack and on the south part of Ukraine, and it's some attack on the critical infrastructure, and maybe is this attack now we've seen some changed Russian tactic on this war, because Ukraine near the winter is coming, and winter in this situation and some attack on critical infrastructure, it's a very important danger for Ukraine on this period, because another issues, some problems in the critical infrastructure and some problems in the social economic sphere about creating new jobs, because some opposition politicians, for example, Yuri Boyko, were talking about some needs for this. And to the winter, now Ukraine have some critical issues. It's a situation with critical infrastructure, social economic problems, and maybe Russia now want to stress on this position on the critical infrastructure.
Mr. Alexei, staying with you, just as a direct question, how could Ukrainian troops manage to make this counteroffensive? Why didn't it make this earlier before?
In my opinion, it connects with some support by the Western countries and some and some increase this helping from USA, Germany, or in other countries. Yeah, and this cumulative effect now we've seen on the eastern part of Ukraine. Cumulative effect of the some Western weapons and cumulative effects of the Ukrainian soldiers. Maybe from Russian position, now they, in my opinion, did not, they thinking what recognized or presented this situation for their inner auditory and for the international community, because now it's some maybe gap or maybe some critical point on this Russian-Ukrainian war.
Very good. Thank you so much for this explanation. Coming to you, Mr. Fariz. This is the explanation of Mr. Alexei. He's in Ukraine, but you and me, we are outside Ukraine, so we do have a different interpretation. Ukraine now is making progress, with no doubts. This latest counteroffensive pushed the Russians to step back and try different solutions, such as cutting power stations. So, what is your interpretation to the situation in general in Ukraine, Mr. Fariz?
Thank you so much. To an extent, I also anticipate such a move from the Russian side. As we see in the eastern side, Russian forces are moving ahead. But in southern side, there is a resistance by Ukrainian army, Ukrainian armed forces. So it's a kind of like status quo, as I see, between the two forces of the two factions. One supported or involved heavily by Russian army and another by resistance forces of Ukrainian armed forces. So the status quo is to be maintained. Russia is not going to change any of these offensive actions. They are not going to tactically change a kind of retreating strategy. They are in fact more offensive. At one point of time, I think 2 months ahead, before, we were kind of anticipating that Russia would kind of strategizing for a retreat from the Ukrainian onslaught. However, the President Putin it seems he has made a decision that it's not going to. And in cases where areas where Ukrainian armed forces and with the support of Western finances and Western support, they are pushing back Russia. Putin is trying to send a message, trying to give a message to Ukrainian army and Western allies that Russia is not going to be defeated, not going to be retreat so early. So, in fact, it could be a plan to target, power outages, to cause power outages, to target power stations as an act of retaliation, trying to send a clear message that Russia is not in a mood to retreat. This is my ring.
Perfect. I'm sorry to cut your train of thought, Mr. Fariz, but previously I have talked to Mr. Howley Schlenger, who's an American living in Germany. He said that this counteroffensive are just kind of a propaganda to show to the Western people in the Western countries that the money has been spent in Ukraine is having an effect. So what are you saying about this?
Yeah, it is having an effect, but it is region specific. For example, I said in South, for example, in the beginning, Russian offenses were targeting, inside of Ukraine, and they were targeting Kiev and other areas in the northern part and the northern part. Now that has been abandoned by Russia because of huge offensive and thanks to support from US and other European allies. However, Russia has not retreated from southern part, and of course they have strong points in eastern and northeastern part of Ukraine. So in fact, the abandonment of Kiev and other larger plan that Russia was organizing, strategizing in March and April or late in the beginning of the attack, they have abandoned to an extent. And I think this credit should be given to heavy support, military support from the West.
Mm-hmm. Quite interesting. Now, let's tackle the second topic in this discussion. Ukraine's state-run nuclear energy operator, Energoatom, announced on Sunday that Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in the southern Ukraine has been shut down as a safety measure, as he added that risk of further damage to line remains high, which would force the plant to be powered by diesel generators, the duration of which is limited by technological resource and the amount of available diesel fuel.
Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant autonomously produces power for its own needs so that it can provide power to all its technological systems, such as safety systems. That way, it ensures power for its own system.
Mr. Alexei, the last reactor now was shut down. This move by the Ukrainian officials is meant to put the last of the 6 working reactors into relatively safe state as fighting continue around the facility. But it also means that if the plant is once again cut off from external power, it would need to rely on diesel generators to power the safety equipment, and the fuel for generators could run out. And if the fuel ran out, what would happen? Don't you think it's a risky move, though it appears not?
Yeah. I'm agree with you because the situation on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, it's a risk not only for Ukraine, it's a risk for the whole European continent or maybe mankind, because Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, it's a major nuclear plant at Europe. Yeah, it's a huge nuclear plant because it's near 25% of all Ukrainian electricity. And situation now on this station dangerous because Ukraine wants to demilitarize the situation with some cooperate with the international forces, for example, international organization, UNO and so on. But from Russia, we haven't seen any progress on this question because some people from the UNO stay on the station, but attack some near the station, attack on the Energodar, the city near the Zaporizhzhia nuclear state. This object under attack.
Mm-hmm. Quite understood. Coming to you, Mr. Fariz, Europe already witnessed the Chernobyl disaster in 1986, and now they are still putting the world in danger by using this nuclear facility as a battlefield. I mean, what it should be done to avoid another nuclear disaster?
Surely, there is fear across Europe and across the world when nuclear reactors, when nuclear power plants are involved. As my fellow speaker, panelist has also indicated that this is a source of electricity for Ukraine, national power plant, a very important critical asset in Ukraine. I am more concerned about President Putin's, larger plan. I think he's trying to give a message because the UN specialized agency, I think it's IEA, who is coming to this particular place, the site where nuclear reactor is existing. I think President Putin has given a note also to enter it, check it, and to verify it whether any harm has been done, which could have a seismic effect entirely not in Ukraine, but beyond the borders of Ukraine. This should not be involved. I think President Putin is very clear that this is an intimidation, but he's not going to involve, directly targeting, which could have a very ill effect and which could turn against his plan, his strategy. He's trying to intimidate. It's a larger, I think, game, larger strategy, which is inclusive of his attacks on power plants, that is trying to give a message that things could be, and he's not giving message to not only to Ukraine, but more particularly to the United States and other Western countries, who is backing that if something happens that to Russia, and Russia is not going to take it easily, and Russia could potentially use nuclear weapons, and they could target such very sensitive things. But I think this is just a message. This is part of a strategy. I don't think President Putin would involve, such thing. I think this is a message we should take like this.
Now moving on to another topic, the energy giant, or rather the Russian energy minister, Nikolai Sholingov, confirmed that his country will not sell oil and gas at a price below the value of the production costs in response to directives of the US Treasury Department regarding a setting of maximum price for Russian crude.
It is impossible. This is a kind of cartel plot against us. We will never allow us to be treated this way. We will not accept the idea of Western countries restricting the prices of our resources. Moscow will not sell oil and gas at a loss or less of their cost.
Before coming to you, Mr. Farid, we do have a live broadcast now in England to follow King Charles' arrival. To follow his as a new monarch. King Charles III has arrived now in Edinburgh, where he is set to accompany his late mother's coffin, Queen Elizabeth II, in a procession through the Scottish capital. And as we can see now, he's been received by officials there in the Scottish Yard in Edinburgh. It is worth mentioning that King Charles III has been crowned as the King of England after the Queen Elizabeth II, who passed away in Thursday evening. Also, it's worth mentioning to be noted that Queen Elizabeth II has passed away in its residence in province, or rather in Balmoral in Scotland. And now even the King Charles III has been received in Scotland now. As we can see, is being received by officials of the state over there. United Kingdom's new King Charles III met with the lawmakers in London Monday, where he received parliamentary condolences and made a short address before flying to Edinburgh to lead the procession as his mother's coffin is taken to the Gillis Cathedral in Edinburgh. Now coming to our discussion, I'm sorry to cut your train of thoughts, Mr. Alexei, as well as Mr. Farid. Mr. Farid, Russia has the upper hand now in the energy field. So the Russian energy minister has all the right to put the price that suits the country's need. Do you agree with that?
What can I say? It's a sovereign country. No, considering the people of Europe, not governments, because it has affected the citizens. And considering that, it's not a fair point. However, I think the war is going on, and Russia, for a person, strategic analyst like me, I want to think in a way that how Russia thinks, because Russia has been slapped by sanctions by many European countries. Canada is also joining it to expand its sanctions. So it's a response from Russia. Obviously, it is affecting Europeans, and it is not fair thing. However, it's a war. It's a counter offensive measures by Russia.
Quite understood. Staying with you, Dr. Faris. Well, we all know that Russia is using the energy sector as a leverage or even as a weapon against all European countries, as they have already claimed. But do you think there is another solution for Russia to avoid sanctions by not using its energy card? I believe this is the only key to fight back these sanctions. Don't you agree with that?
Is the question?
I'm agree in some aspect with you, but in my opinion, now we have some experiment from the Western countries about the control or under the market on the energy, and this experiment about the gas and about the oil, about the price on this. And very interesting situation, because it's some experiment. In my opinion, in Western countries, they did not know what's the successful or fall with this strategy. But in some aspect, it's effect on some sanction policy, but it's one of the way to cut some huge financial resources to Russia from the gas and oil. And because these resources to use a Russian military mission, and maybe in this situation, Russia need a new market for their resources, maybe India or maybe China. But it's very interesting because, in my opinion, very interesting how behavior in future China or India in this situation of the price below this idea of the Western countries. They will do in the position on now, or they connects with the Western countries in this position about the Russian gas and oil.
Perfectly understood. Staying with you, Mr. Faris, now derived from Mr. Alexei words, he said that China or even India, they could be an alternative for Russian markets. But let us say, if China and even India open the market, full opening for Russia, will this help Russia to recover from these economic sanctions?
Yes, to a certain extent, but not in the same volume as Russia has with Europe. I think India, I can't say much about China, but I think for Indian government or India, it has already opened to Russian gas supply, because 80%, at least 75% to 80% of India's energy needs are met by importing from Middle East and other countries, especially Middle East. Now we have so much gas pricing issues, sanctions by the United States on Iran. So we need new markets. First, for the Indian government, fulfilling the needs of this country, fulfilling the needs of the Indians, they are the primary interest, national interest. So whether that comes from Iran, whether that comes from Saudi or other Arab countries, or whether that comes from Russia, that is least matter. In this connection, India has opened up channels with Russians, and I must accept that. But however, to your question, the kind of Russia recovers to trade with Europe previously, before the war, before the sanctions, I don't think India has come up to that level. But maybe combination with other countries, huge countries, or China or other new markets, it could possibly an alternative.
Very good. Now let's talk on another topic in our discussion. Italy must quickly cut energy bills for firms and households, even if it means hiking the country's towering public debt. The leader of a new centrist group, Calenda, competing at the month's election, told Reuters that Mario Draghi's outgoing government should invest 10 billion euros to help major gas-consuming industries and reimburse people part of the increase in gas and electricity costs?
So I think we should work together in Europe in order, first of all, to face the emergency, which means to suspend, in a way, what is the normal dynamics of the market, and to try to lower the cost of, energy and other very important materials, not only for citizens, but also for companies, because companies' risk to fail now is very high. And we need to be very careful on the environmental transition as well, because we need to do it, but we need to do it carefully, because otherwise you will have the perfect tsunami, rules that are stricter and stricter, and you want less gas, but at the same time you need more gas.
Now, I'm sorry to cut you in thoughts, gentlemen. Now let's go back to Scotland, where we do have a live broadcast of King Charles, who arrived in Edinburgh, where the gun salute, the 21 gun salute, has been taking place. The king has been inspecting some of the troops. Ceremony of the keys has now taken place. It is usually an annual event. Edinburgh Lord Robert Allerge offers the keys of the city of Edinburgh to the new monarch and welcomes him to your ancient and hereditary kingdom of Scotland. It's worth mentioning, ladies and gentlemen, that all this procession is kind of a tradition in the United Kingdom monarchy. By tradition, the king acknowledges the offer, touches the keys, and then says, "I return these keys, being perfectly convinced that they cannot be placed in a better hands than those of Lord Provost and councillors of my good city of Edinburgh." Again, I beg your pardon, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Alexi, for this cut. Mr. Alexi, beyond Italy and other European countries, what about Ukraine? How would Kiev face the coming winter under these circumstances? War is still going on, a huge shortage within the energy sector.
Kiev now needs some help from the West, and before the war, before the winter, its help much more major strengths, maybe for Kiev, and much more importance. Now, European country to give Kiev some financial aids, and in Kiev thinking that and some military aids, and it's also connects with Italy, because it's some consensus decision of the European Union. But I repeat my idea about my opinion. I mentioned about this experiment on the price of the gas, because Italy also part of this experiment, and it's experiment not only about the Russian gas now. Now it's a discussion about the all gas, and control price for all gas on the European gas market. It's very important, and for Ukraine it's also very important, because Ukraine now needs some also gas help from European Union.
Mm-hmm. Very good indeed. Coming to you, Mr. Fariz, if this war, the so-called special military operation, goes for a long period, more than it already takes, will this energy crisis in Europe hit the Asian continent in a different manner? For instance, in terms of trade and business, because we all know that Europe won't produce the world market as it used to.
Definitely, it will have a impact on Asia, a spiral effect on Asia and its relations, Asian countries, including India, and its relations with European countries. As we see, winter is coming. Europe has already started facing the energy crisis. We see Germany, Italy, and
Quite interesting. Now, let's tackle another topic. The EU approved the proposal made by the European Commission following the political agreement of the foreign ministers. Russian citizens have lost access to the European Union's visa facilitation agreement with Russia. In practice, this decision means that the visa application fee will cost 80 euros from the current 35 euros. It will be necessary to present more documents. This will be longer processing times and more restrictive rules for issuance of multiple entry permits. Sorry, there were a problem with the network, Mr. Fariz. How would you consider this restriction on the Russians? I mean, why would they pay the government's debt? Don't you think it's a sort of elimination? Briefly, please, because we do have less than a minute.
Could you please repeat the question, because I didn't get it?
Europe now are discussing to ban Russians from visa to enter Europe.
Again, it will have a very counter effective. We must know that, looking for a neutral vantage point, we must know that this counter offensive measures, this thing, if goes on, it will affect Europe heavily. I think the Russians have, particularly the president, has already thought out everything. He has checklisted all the worst things that could happen: sanctions, military support. I think energy crisis and all these things. So I don't think that could be not fair. That could be a strategic thing. But this is war. We cannot know it. That will have an impact.
Thank you ever so much, Mr. Fariz. You joined me from India, Mr. Alexei from Ukraine. Thank you ever so much for always being with us in this debate. To this end, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us as well. And for now, all I can say, take care of yourself and have a blessed day.